girls' school, and I didn't get anywhere near a computer when I was at school. I was taught home economics and needlework. I actually learnt to iron a man's shirt in one lesson, which I didn't really get how that would be relevant to me in my life, along with rolling a Swiss roll and embroidering my name on an apron. None of which are skills that I've ever used. But my brother, who went to a mixed comprehensive up the road, was taught computer science and technical drawing. And I was much more interested in what he was doing, mainly to annoy him actually at the time as a 15-year-old. And my parents luckily were in a position to be able to afford to buy a BBC microcomputer in 1984, at a time when really you know, computers in the home were still very unusual. So my journey so far, you know, as a teenager I was lucky to have a few role models on television. Johnny Ball was a brilliant role model who just was so enthusiastic about numbers and maths and technology kind of focused things. And then of course there was Tomorrow's World. And the amazing Maggie Philbin, who I've recently come to meet a few times and work with her. In fact, I met her at the Sunday Times Education Festival last year, and she came up to me and said, "Oh God, Kate, it's so nice to meet you, I see you on TV all the time." It absolutely floored me, because I was like, wow, this is like a woman who helped me become who I am today. So she was a megastar for me back then. But the thing that really got me into technology was a game called Elite. Any of you know the game? Okay, so it came out on the BBC Micro, and first of all, and it was the first, what they call a sandbox game. So Grand Theft Auto is a sandbox game now, where you can travel anywhere in the world and do mini missions, or not do missions, just explore if you want. And before that, games were all about the coin drop experience. They were Pac-Man or Space Invaders, where you put your coins in, you had a number of lives, you had to get the high score, and then when that was over, it was over. And these sandbox games really revolutionised the whole idea of gaming, and home computers had just become, you know, the new thing as well. So my brother was playing this game called Elite, and I was curious about it. You know, it was used a technology called procedural generation, where the universe, so it was a space trading game where you went in your spaceship and you picked up produce at one planet, and you travelled to another star system and you sold it for a profit, hopefully. And you could choose if you wanted to be, you know, if you wanted to be a regular trader, or if you wanted to be a bit more dodgy and do sort of smuggling, but then you would have to deal with the police. You could also choose to be a pirate if you wanted to, and just rob other people. So there were all these choices and ways that you could play the game, and it happened inside a universe that was never ending within this box on the table. Now back in the that seems pretty sort of commonplace these days, but back in the mid-1980s it was like witchcraft. It was like, you know, you kind of wanted to look round the back of it and go, how does that happen? So that's really what kind of ignited my interest in technology, was just I didn't understand how it was possible. But more than that, as a side benefit, you know, at school I'd flatly refused to engage in any kind of education. I left school at 16 with no qualifications, and I had flatly refused to engage in any kind of academic process. But through this game, I was learning basic economics, I was learning about culture, I was learning geography of a sort, because I learned to plot a path on a map and, you know, and work out where I was by coordinates. So there were all of these sort of like side things coming in, and it really saddens me today when I hear people say kids play too many games, because you can get so much from a game. And especially if you've got a sort of a slightly tempestuous child to deal with, as I probably was, I will fully admit to, you know, it can be a way of actually subversively sort of slipping some education in there. So, you know, I really would beg everybody who complains about kids playing too many video games to actually think about what they can get from it. Hand-eye coordination, problem solving, all of these skills which are really important in life. So that was what got me into technology. I became a gamer. Yes, I know how she feels. And I've spent my life really then working with games. I ended up working in the technical side of things at I started building my own computers, pulling them apart, figuring out how they went together again. I ended up working in a CD manufacturing plant, producing video games, and then one of my customers saw this advert in a trade magazine, Computer Trade Weekly it's called, and it was Nickelodeon were looking for a young and funky female presenter who knew about video games. And my customer was always teasing me because I was actually a proper gamer, and still in the early 90s, this was fairly unusual. And so he dared me to phone up for the advert. So I did. And I think because I was the only person who wasn't absolutely desperate to be on television, and also I really did love video games, they gave me the job. And this was just 4 days every 2 months to go up to Leeds and film it. And when I was doing that, I'd always wanted to be a writer, and I'd never kind of had the education or the qualifications, but I'd always loved writing. I wrote stories for myself. And so I wrote a bunch of reviews for games that I liked and sent them off to loads of magazines with a cover note saying, I'm on telly, give us a job. And eventually one of them did. EMAP Images decided they wanted to piggyback my TV sort of personality and publicity, and I ended up working as a games reviewer for them. The magazine I worked for unfortunately went bust after 6 months, but by then I was integrated into that world and I had enough contacts, so I was able to go on and forge a career for myself as a freelance journalist, and you know, have worked with some brilliant people who taught me the trade, and you know, I was rough as anything back then, but you know, hopefully by now, 18 years later, I've kind of developed into the career that I have now. So as I said, I do a weekly slot on BBC Click where I review websites and apps. I get paid to surf the internet looking for cool stuff. Try not to hate me too much. I also often appear on Daybreak. Normally, if I need to go and persuade them that social media doesn't give you cancer or anything like that, I kind of consider myself the voice of reason when it comes to the internet and technology, as is so often the case. People are scared of stuff that they don't understand. I do columns for Web User magazine, National Geographic Traveller magazine, and I just released my first book, Working the Cloud, which came out in March. And if you'd have told any of my teachers this is where I would be at the age of 45, I think they would have laughed you out of the school gates. She'll never amount to anything. But it was all to do with computers, and it was to do with the ability that I had back then to get hold of technology and pull it apart and put it back together again. And that's really important, because yesterday's tech, you know, when I started out, mobile phones had aerials. And anyway, you were lucky if you could get a signal. Actually, my first mobile phone came with a map, and you had to triangulate your position between 3 aerials in London, and you had to drive there and then park, and yeah, okay, I'm on the map, and now I can make a phone call. So that was my first mobile phone. Imagine how things have changed, right? I mean, I'm sure some of you have similar experiences. There was no Facebook, there was no Twitter. It didn't even exist when I started out in journalism. And it's unthinkable now that there could ever have been anything such as life without social media. In fact, the closest we had to social media was GeoCities, which was you know, the original social media where people would set up their sites, and it became very famous for sort of garish colours and Comic Sans text script all over the place. But that was, that was our equivalent of social media back then, where you would go to this site which was full of people's, if you like, blogs of the day. Yes, I'm online. Yay! Can you imagine? I mean, kids today, they don't know that they've got it, right? So, that's a bit loud, isn't it? People got excited about Windows launches. I remember the Windows 95 launch, and everyone was like, yeah, it was like a big rock and roll event. And everyone was like, yeah, new version of Windows. And seeing Blue, oh, yeah, he was considered pretty cool at the time. Seeing Blue meant you just lost a hold. In fact, do any of you follow Commander Chris Hadfield? So he's a Canadian astronaut. and he's up in the International Space Station at the moment. You should definitely follow him because he's awesome, and he keeps tweeting. He does videos and stuff like that. But he tweeted the other day, the computers they use up there are so old, because now you don't get the blue screen anymore with modern computers, but the computers they're using up in the International Space Station are so old that he went to connect with CNN and he blue screened, and he actually tweeted a picture the other day saying, I didn't expect to see this 5 minutes before going live to CNN. And I tweeted back, in space no one can hear you, blue screen. Which I'm proud of. So that was technology then. And now, thankfully though, technology today, and computers particularly, has just changed immeasurably, and there are so many more opportunities, and opportunities coming back for kids to get interested in pulling them apart and seeing how they work. The Raspberry Pi. The amazing David Braben, who actually, as well as being the man, one of the men responsible for bringing the Raspberry Pi to us, was also one of the creators of the Elite game that got me first interested in technology. So that's like a really, really special combination for me personally. But yes, technology is cheaper, it's more accessible, it's becoming more playful. Girls get to study it alongside boys and not just see it when they get invited to their hidden mistress's office to talk about their behaviour, as was the case with me. And careers in technology are just amazing now. You know, you can be a game designer, you can be a fashion designer, you can be a forensic scientist, you can be a space person, space woman, sounds wrong, but space, yeah, you can work in space, you can be an astronaut. And in a world where we landed a rover vehicle on Mars via a space crane, a sky crane, sorry, really, you know, beyond the Earth is our limits now. We're not limited by anything anymore. There's so much that technology allows us to do, and a lot of it is freely available online, especially to look at NASA and all the stuff that they do with their sort of collecting images through their long-range telescopes and all of this stuff. It's all freely available online, and they've made it open as well, so that you can, you know, you can get a class of kids, you can download the videos and the pictures from the internet of the space missions and you know, the Mars rover missions, and you can recut them and publish your own versions of them. They've made it completely accessible in that way, which is just a brilliantly inspirational thing. I remember my nephew, who's 9 years old, when we saw this and the video. Did you see the Mars landing? So they did, was it the 7 minutes of terror they called it, and they did the sort of the computer generated reenactment of how that 7 minutes of the landing would go down. And we watched it together, and my nephew turned around to me and said, I want to be an engineer, I want to make a sky crane. So, and you know, that's just like, wow, that's amazing. And I hope that, you know, a few years before that he said to me he wanted to be a stop sign, so it's definitely an improvement. I think he meant the person who turns the stop signs, but you know, it's good to have all your bases covered when you're thinking about career options. So yeah, and that's the young side of things, but today's event is about inclusion, technology for inclusion, and you know, I really want to look at the other side of things as well, because that's my grandmother. Beryl. She is 75 this year, but that was her on her 74th birthday, and my niece Natasha, and she lost her husband 6-7 years ago, and shortly after that had some problems with her knees and had to have some fairly major operations on her knees. She's not that mobile anymore, but she still lives at home in the house that she's lived at since she was in her early 30s, with her whole life and all her friends around her, and she's able to do that because of the internet, because she has a laptop computer. It connects her to a place where she can order her supermarket shopping. They deliver it, they bring it into her kitchen. She can connect to her doctor and the health services through you know, brilliant websites like NHS Choices, which is just an immense resource that we have in this country. And she can connect to her family through Facebook. My neighbour at the end of my street, I set her up on the internet last year because her son moved to Australia with his family, and she now regularly Skypes, video Skypes with her son and his children in Australia, and it's free. You know, beyond obviously having the connection into your house, it's actually free to do that. So it's a massively enabling technology, the internet. So she can order her online groceries, contact local services, book doctor's appointments, contact friends and family, but most importantly remain independent, and that's really important for her because she doesn't want to be, you know, we hear it all the time with older people, is they don't want to be a trouble to you. And she really does feel like she's got her independence still. The great thing that I see as well now, if you've got any older relatives or friends who have felt it difficult to get in with technology, I remember I did a series for This Morning last year. We were looking at teaching silver surfers, horrible phrase, but teaching them to use the internet. And one of the problems that I found quite interesting with these people was the input methods. They couldn't interface with the technology because it was completely alien to have a mouse there and that action to do that, and coordinating the two things was, you know, we've grown up with it, a lot of us, so it kind of feels very natural, but it's not natural for a lot of the older generation. And they were gripping the mouse, you know, sort of like death grip, and squeezing all the buttons, and then everything on the screen would change and they'd panic. And this is, you know, this is really a big thing because they don't want to look silly as well. It's like, oh, you know, I didn't know what to say, I didn't know what to do. But now touch screen technology is brilliant because it is a much more intuitive, natural way of working for young children, but also for the older generation, because they can touch what they want, they can drag it down, they can pull it across. And so we're really beginning to see much more technology now being much easier for the older generation to use in a much more intuitive and natural way. And further from that, there's also just myriad of things that are brilliant for inclusion for people with disabilities and people. You know, one of the things that I saw recently, which I really loved, and I'm going to let you watch this video. $1, $1, $20, $20, £5, £5, £10, £10, €5, €5, €20, €20, 50 Australian dollars, 50 Australian dollars, 100 Australian dollars, 100 Australian dollars. £50, £50, £50, £50. This is just brilliant. This is a really good example of how £50, £50. Image recognition technology has become so powerful. That's a free app, and it allows people who you know, don't find it as easy to see for whatever reason. Maybe they're partially sighted, you know, maybe they've got cognitive or colour kind of issues. You know, there's all sorts of different reasons why people can't necessarily see what it is they've got in their hand before they hand it over to a cashier. And that's instant recognition and audio feedback. And there's loads of stuff like that on the web now, which is just opening up the sort of freedom and independence for a whole new sector of people. So, yeah. Very excited I am about the internet. You might have been able to tell already. So that's me, Kate Russell, and I post on workingthecloud.biz. I'm always putting articles and reviews of new stuff that's good for sort of small businesses and entrepreneurs. If you've got any questions, you know, come and tweet me. Twitter is the quickest way I respond to people, so please tweet me. My party trick is I have a website for every occasion, so if you need something and you think that there may be no help for you, I bet you I can find a website for it or an app for it. So in fact my work colleagues know me as Kate, I've got an app for that, Russell. So yeah, thank you for listening to me, and I hope you have a really amazing day, and you learn loads and go away inspired to inspire the next generation of tech-hungry, forward thinkers. Thank you.